Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I'm Neil Smith, joined by a new friend, Holly Crawshaw. Holly, thank you so much for joining us.
Nils, I have to apologize for saying your name incorrectly when we first met on on today's call. I called you Niles. I'm so sorry. I'm sure you get that all the time.
All the time. And we met on social media, and so I do
Yep.
get that a lot of people that it's like we've interacted with for a while, but they assume that it is pronounced a certain way. And I appreciate you asking. And for those listening that maybe have thought my name was Niles, as most people immediately do, it's funny.
There's got to be a story there. There's got to be a story there.
So and I appreciate you asking. So it's a Swedish name. My great grandfather who brought my family over from Sweden to Boston area was named Nils Berggren, and so that's where the name came from. But with that name, and it's like John in Sweden. It's very common and
Oh,
normal.
okay.
I've never met another Nils up until like a month ago. I met a Nils online. He's also I'm in New York, but he's in Boston. But he's got that Swedish descent as well. But my mom is always like, it's like she'll tell people, she's like, you just read it. It's like Nils, Hills, Thrills, Pills. And I'm like, Mom, all of those have two L's. You could get thrown in an extra L, even though it wasn't the way my
Help a
family
guy
member
out.
is. Yeah, but
That's
that's
hilarious.
the way it goes. And I was introverted. I'd go through like a whole year of school and not correct teachers because I was too introverted to say anything.
That's so
It
sad.
is. It is sad as I look back, and now it works out for Google because there's no other Neil Smiths out there, and so it's easy to find and
So
nice having a
you're
unique name.
you're SEO optimized.
SEO optimized mostly due to having a weird name. So there you have it. I'm taking some good out of it. Well, Holly, for those that aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your background and what it is you do.
Sure, that's a great question. So I started in about 2005 writing in the church space. I spent about a decade on staff with a mega church based out here in Atlanta. But prior to that, I was, as we were talking about before, I was a volunteer leader at my church, and the church had, I think, a bookkeeper and a pastor, right, that were
Okay.
paid
Yep.
staff. And then the rest of us put in part-time to full-time hours,
Yep.
right? But no pay. So
Yes.
I have a wide gamut of experience in the church space, from being a volunteer leader to working at a megachurch, which had was very resourced and very staffed. So I hope whatever I share today will be helpful for churches, regardless of the size, right? Because I've had to
Yes.
make it work in both scenarios. So, like I said, I was on staff with a mega church for about a decade. I loved my time there. I absolutely loved how intentional the leadership was in developing us and allowing us to sort of try new things. So I always wanted to be a writer. When I was in kindergarten, my grandmother saved this little diary entry that I had. We had a diary entry in our class,
Yeah.
and we were talking about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I knew at 5 years old I wanted to be a writer. In fact, I wrote, I want to be a author. So wasn't grammatically there yet, but
Yeah.
the dream was alive and well. And so, everybody else wanted to be a movie star or pop singer, and I just wanted to be
That's
a
awesome.
writer. I'm not sure about what that says about my 5-year-old psyche, but I've just always known that that's what God called me to be. I've always known
Yeah.
that. And so in my time, I got an English degree, right? And I taught high school 1 year. And I knew very quickly that was not where God had called me.
Yeah.
I taught high school English, and teachers are superheroes. They
Yeah.
truly are. My mom's a teacher. They do not get enough credit, praise, or money. But after that, I went to work at this church, wonderful organization, and I just started writing there. It wasn't my staff role. My staff role was a volunteer coordinator, basically coordinated about 75 middle school small group leaders. From there, I moved into the preschool environment director, had about 7 staff that I managed there. And we had, about 2,000 preschoolers over the course of a few services. So during that time, this church allowed me to write in many capacities. I did some ghostwriting there. I did some writing to parents, writing to leaders, creating resources and materials and blogs. And I also worked contractually during this time for a wonderful organization called Orange. In fact, they were the first people to ever give me $1 for my writing. And so that was back in 2005. So I've been, and I still write for Orange. And so it's been almost 18 years.
That's awesome.
Since I got the first $1 for my writing. But yeah, and so I came off staff after I had my second daughter. I'm a mom to 3 girls.
Nice.
So it's emotional around here.
Yeah. I've got 2 daughters, so I can relate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of took my writing full time, I would say, after being at that church for about 10 years after the birth of my second daughter. Was writing a lot more for Orange at that time, trying to get my own thing going. Was approached by an agent in Houston, the Fed agency, and started writing for big publishing houses. And so I've been blessed enough to have a few big projects with all 5 major publishing houses, all in the faith space. So, and that's where I am now. And so I kind of have my own thing. It's called the Story Spark.
Yeah.
And I'm just writing for people and trying to tell as many stories as I can that wouldn't otherwise get told. So I'm a full-time ghostwriter now.
I love it. And I found you because of your words on LinkedIn as you
LinkedIn.
Crafted those messages, and it caught my attention. And you have such great engagement on LinkedIn. And I think there's just so much power in words. I'm embarrassed to look back on so many of the things I did when I was on staff at a church. But I remember when I started as like social media manager, social media pastor was my title. And I remember we hired and I was put in charge of, kind of elevated to part of what I was overseeing was communications in our church. And we hired a marketing director, this incredibly smart lady. We actually hired her away from the San Antonio Spurs as she was doing marketing for them. And she one of her first questions was, who's our copywriter? And I was like I literally thought like copy machine. And I was like, what is she talking about?
That
Copywriter.
Is the best story.
And she's like who's writing all the words on the website? I'm like, we all are we just do it. We don't think about strategy. We don't think about the word. Just like whoever wrote it is the writer. And she's like, no, we need a voice, like our brand. And so we went the whole rebranding process. And what was the biggest part of that branding process? I thought it was our logo. It was actually our words that we began to align messaging to who we were. And what was fascinating is I had been running all of the digital advertising for the church. I'd been running all of these things, and I was just making it up as I go without strategy, without intentionality. And when we began to prioritize our words, and what I prioritized was our graphics, our videos, our visual elements. And when we began to align words, it moved the needle, with what we were measuring of how many people were actually visiting the church, how many people were responding to our ads. And it was so eye-opening to me, the power of words. And I think it's so often put on the back burner because people just think like, oh, we need a graphic designer because I don't know how to do InDesign. Well, I know how to write. But I think I know, now that there's a real science and art to how we package words. Holly, as you have specialized in that, for so long, what was your journey into beginning to put words together? So as you were at 5, loved putting words together, but how did you professionally really start to prioritize that and bring that into churches and organizations?
That's a great question, Nils. So when I was at this church, this large church, they were a church that pursued excellence at all levels.
Yes.
From first impression, walking in from the parking lot, keeping the parking lot clean, keeping the bathrooms very clean and well stocked. And I, up to that point, hadn't had those resources made available to me. And, we get this attitude in the church world where done is better than perfect.
Yes.
And in a lot of cases, right, that's as good as you can possibly do, and that is excellence for you.
Yes.
But I was in this new world where anything within reason was possible.
Yeah.
And I was given the budget to say, okay, how can we make every communication excellent? How can we learn how to identify? Because talking to the parent of a preschooler, that's a different voice than talking to the parent of a teenager. And so how can you sort of have one cohesive brand voice and reposition yourself in a way to be heard? Because parents want to know that you understand, and not just parents, but the singles ministry. They want the recipients of those communications, they want to feel understood by you. And so it really taught me a lot about getting to know your ICP, right? That's a business term, your ideal client profile.
Yeah.
But I learned that.
Hey guys, it's Neil Smith, and I'm interrupting this episode to highlight one of our sponsors. And this sponsor is one of the companies that I recently acquired, and it's a company called Church Press. And I was blown away when I found out about Church Press, and it is the most SEO optimized, search engine optimization, optimized website platform for churches. And it is one price, and it covers everything you need to have a great website presence, to design, set up a beautiful website that works great, but I think most importantly is found by Google so that people can find your church. And so if you want to upgrade your website or build a new website, we would love to help. Go to churchpress.co and you get more information and learn more. We also have a free SEO audit that you can get right there on the website of your website. So if you want to see how optimized your website is, just go to churchpress.co and you don't have to sign up for anything. It's totally free. And we would love to help you build a better website that is found by Google. Let's get back to the episode.
Understanding what matters and what aggravates and what tensions these people carry, that's what you need to address in those communications. And I learned the power of having people feel understood, because I'm talking about I'm stating their problems. And I'm saying, hey, we have a unique solution. We have a unique sales position. It's not that different from business, right? ICP, USP, we have a unique sales position. We have this service, we have this product, we have this resource, we have this gathering, and this problem that you're feeling, this tension that you're carrying, we have the answer. And it's not so much talking about the church. It's talking about the audience and their problems and what they're dealing with. It was learning to leverage knowing your audience and to do so excellently. You know, a lot of times in the church world, or even in Christian writing, right? And up until, recent history, really even, and I hesitate to say this, but I'm just going to be honest, Christian music, there's this sort of assumption that it's going to be less than. A Christian movie is going to be less than a movie that's released. That's not a Christian movie. A Christian artist is going to release a song and it's somehow going to be less than if a pop star released a song. A Christian book is written and we don't really need to edit that, just get it out there. But one of the scripture verses that I come back to a lot in my work in the faith space, it's Acts, and it's actually James who says it. And he's talking like there's all this dissent around the Gentiles not following all the Jewish customs, right? Yeah. And it's Peter, it's Barnabas, Paul, James. They're all having this conversation, and they're kind of arguing. What should we make the Gentiles do to come to God? And basically, James says we shouldn't make it hard. Yes. We shouldn't make it hard. In other words, let's remove the obstacles. Yes. Let's remove the obstacles for anybody who wants to come to God. And so in my writing, I pursue excellence so that my lack of excellence doesn't become an obstacle, because I don't want, and it will turn people off. I don't want bad grammar, misspellings, a lack of brand awareness and a lack of awareness of my audience. I don't want that to become an obstacle for someone. Yeah. And so I really learned that the pursuit of excellence in the faith space is more important than anywhere else, because why would you want a lack of effort or a lack of investment to become an obstacle? If you think about God, our creator, right? He created with words. I think that's super important to keep in mind, the power of words. He spoke life into existence. But if you think about God created with precision, and God created with excellence. He didn't halfway do anything. If you've seen a sunset, we talk about the creativity of God, but I don't think we talk enough about the precision and excellence of his creation. You think about, I'm not a science girl by any stretch, but you think about the earth tilted on its axis. If it was a negligible amount tilted in another direction, none of this would work, right? You want to talk about precision and excellence. God was out there doing work, and he was out there doing work, and he didn't just throw it out there and say, well, I hope they like it. Or, I did what I needed to do. I checked the box. No, he was very precise and very excellent. If we're made in his image, and if we're trying to pursue, being like him, then it only makes sense for us to be precise and excellent and remove any obstacles from coming to him. So I would say those were the major lessons that I've learned, not just while at that church, but since then in the Christian space is, I've worked with very well-known people in the faith space and in the business space. I've worked with very well-known people, and then I also still work with first-time authors. And I approach every project with the same level of responsibility, and it's being excellent. It's every story deserves to be told, and every story deserves to be told without obstacles to the import of the story.
Yes. That's so good. That's so good.
I think I just preached. I didn't plan to say that. I didn't plan to go.
The preacher in you came out.
Listen.
And I think I think this is a message that needs to be preached. And it's a conviction for me, because I definitely lean on the done is better than perfect side of things. Sometimes I want to run so hard and fast, and pastors are often so entrepreneurial and they have so many ideas, and so often I think we miss some huge opportunities for excellence and impacting people because we just move too fast. And sometimes I think we do need to slow down and really be more refined. And honestly, to your word of we need to be more excellent in everything that we're putting out, and what that will do from an impact standpoint will actually reach more people than doing more things. If we do fewer things, but doing them with a level of excellence. And it is a tension, I think, that pastors have to manage. Holly, getting into the weeds of church communications and the different platforms that are out there. We have words on our website. We have words on our emails. We have words on our social media. We have words on our posters. We have words on our slides and our screens. Where would you begin in even just helping a church? Where should they prioritize their words and maybe even begin to focus on their refinement as they see that priority within their church?
That's a great question. I would start with a website. And you hear website and you automatically think this very difficult, expensive, tech heavy process.
Yes.
But you can literally create a landing page website with a couple of tabs in 2 hours. I have created myself using Squarespace to use a specific example. They're templated. It's literally fill in the blank, right? And so go buy a domain name off GoDaddy.com, go into get Squarespace, get a free template, and set up some sort of landing page for your church, because when people hear about you, the first thing they're going to do is go look at your church's website.
Yes.
And that's where I would invest if I were a church and I had no media presence at all yet. That is exactly where I would start. I would start with a solid landing page that has very clearly stated hours of services, the order of service. I think when people walk into a building and they know exactly what's going to happen, they feel a sense of control, right? It's information that they're equipped with that makes them less anxious and more likely to show up, because they're like, oh, well, we're going to do, a few songs. There's going to be an offering. This service, they might have a baptism here. They might not. And then, we're going to get a 25-minute message, and then we'll be out, by noon or 10:30 or what have you. So I think stating very clearly what happens in your services,
Yep.
the hours, directions, what childcare is offered,
Yes.
how to sign up for childcare. Again, it's about removing obstacles, right? Because
Yes.
these pieces of information, they inform guests and they make guests feel at ease and more likely to show up. The other thing I would include is a statement of faith. What's your church about? What's your bottom line? Do you believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible? What can guests expect to be taught from stage? If you're in the middle of a series, I think it's a great idea to update this weekly and say, hey, we're in the middle of this series on Job. Last week, we learned about Job's friends and how, they called him an idiot. And this week, we're going to see, Job's redemption and how God blessed him the latter half of his life more than he did. I think just giving people information removes that obstacle of anxiety in a way that without it, it's going to be much more difficult for somebody to show up in your doorway without any information. So I'd start with a website. If I can do it, listen, if I can build a website, and I did build my first one, and I actually built one for a friend last week in about 3 hours, and it had a portfolio, it had a couple of tabs. It's in Squarespace. It's simple. And the template was free. And to host the website for a year was like $60.
Yes.
We can find the resources to make this happen. A lot of it is intimidation and not knowing, like I'm not a tech person. I don't know anything about, social media or whatever. Figure it out.
Yes.
Figure it out. But you don't know until you educate yourself. Go on YouTube and search a video for how to create a Squarespace website. Pause it, do the step, play it. There's so many resources available. It really removes a lot of our excuses. So I'd start with a website, a landing page, bare minimum service hours and what childcare is provided, and a statement of faith. Those three things.
Yeah.
I would start there. Second place is most parents now are on Instagram.
Yep.
It's the biggest platform for parents in social media. It's bigger than Facebook, especially for young parents of young children, of your preschoolers. Get on Instagram. And you know what's funny is analytically, if you look at the analytics of Instagram, the worst day to post is Sunday. It's the worst day. And yet when churches do have Instagrams, that's typically the only day that they post.
Interesting.
So the best days to post are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yep.
Between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., your local time. And the best of those days are Tuesday and Wednesday. And those are like those middle of the week days that I think for a lot of church workers, like you're preparing, especially, you're preparing your environment, you're preparing the music, you're a pastor and you got just a few more days left because Sunday's always coming. It's very difficult to prioritize social media posting in the middle of the week. And yet those are the highest views on those days. You get the highest amount of views. And so it's something simple like coming up with a social media calendar. And that sounds like a really fancy word, but it could be in the notes section of your iPhone.
Yep.
Sunday, post, hey, we're having this service this time, this childcare is provided. Would love to see you there.
Yes.
Follow up on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday with a post. You can post pictures from your service. You can post pictures of your environment. Hey, here's where our kindergartners hang out. Here's, where our kindergartner through second grade hangs out. This is the small group leader in charge of them. This is, Sarah, she's a senior in high school. Sarah, loves kids, wants to be a teacher one day. It doesn't have to be that deep, right? But you want to stay top of mind and connected. And you can recycle posts. Use a different picture. You can create slides in Canva for free. I'm telling you, if I can figure it out, anybody can. Anyone can. But that's the second thing I would add would be an Instagram. And frankly, if you're going to do an Instagram, you might as well do a Facebook because it is still the biggest social media platform in existence. It still is. My kids like to tease me because I still have a Facebook. Look, I've bought and sold a lot of quality furniture on Facebook Marketplace.
Yes.
Okay. So, and you can push content
Yep.
from Instagram to Facebook. And what
Yep.
that means is you post it on Instagram and you
Yep.
can put your settings to where
Yep.
it'll have that content automatically show up on Facebook. So it's
Yes.
really a two birds, one stone
Yes.
deal at that point. But that's where I would have churches start. And, you know, to back up to your point, if we want to back up even further than that, it would be to establish a brand outside of a logo. And you have no idea. I do a lot of brand consultations.
Yeah.
How many people think a brand is a logo? I think that's the most common misconception. Yes. But while a logo is important and it does sort of stand for your church, there have to be words that you wrap around that. You have to have some sort of a mission statement. Like, what are you about? Are you a church for the unchurched?
Yes.
Are you a church for people who want to go deeper with the Holy Spirit? Yes. Are you a church? Those are two different churches, right?
Yeah.
A church for people who want.
How does the church figure out what that is? Like their distinctive, as they begin to figure out what words do we need to align to articulate who we are to our community and to who we are to those that aren't yet coming to our church?
I think that's a great question. I think it's not a decision that a pastor can make on his own or shouldn't make on his own.
Yeah.
I think that's when you call in the people who have been there from the beginning. You get together a board, so to speak. Maybe you have one, maybe you have deacons, maybe you have leadership team at your church. But even if you have church staff, I would not limit these conversations to your staff. I would bring in regular attenders, those rock star volunteers who have been there from the beginning, who get what you're doing. Maybe they haven't verbalized it yet, but they get what you're about. And I would say form an advisory board to figure out what are your values, right? Identify 5 values, identify who it is you're after, and how you want to create transformation in the lives of whomever you're after.
Yeah.
And so coming up with a mission statement, there's a lot of resources online for that as well. And I would definitely recommend a pastor download some of that content on how to create a mission statement for your church, identify who you're after. Because, you know, some churches might want to say, well, we're after everyone.
Of course.
We want to, and you are. Like your doors are open to every single soul that wants to walk through them.
Right.
But getting at the crux of your 5% differentiator, and I know that sounds so businessy, but the truth is every church has a specific heart, right?
Yeah.
It has a specific quality that is unique to that church. Figuring out how to verbalize your 5% differentiator as a church will help you in your mission and will help you in your vision, because it will help you figure out where changes need to be made, right? If we're not having new visitors every week or every month, or we haven't had, somebody join the church in a long time, nobody wants to be baptized, we're not reaching, no one is professing salvation, and knowing what you want and what you're after and what you're about helps you understand when something is falling short, not necessarily the pastor, but your strategy's falling short.
Yeah.
And we need to optimize. We need to recalibrate. That's why it's so important.
I love that. I think it's, at the end of the day, it is a process of, that you need to go back to regularly is, are we effectively communicating who we are through our various message points in the different channels that we're communicating? Tangibly, email is a big question. Is email dead? Should churches prioritize email? What does that look like from your perspective, and how often maybe even should churches be emailing their congregation?
Great question. So email is still the best way to communicate. It's still the best way to communicate. What you have to do is become, you want to become the person in the inbox that they want they don't want to just delete without opening.
Yeah.
So when I was we had so many conversations at this large church that I worked for about how often we should email.
Yeah.
And the goal is to not email unless you absolutely have to communicate something.
Okay.
But you want to add value with each email.
Yes.
So you want to put as much content as you can into an email to not have to double email, but you also want the emails to be easily understood.
Yes.
And the way you do that is you have to have a database.
Yes.
You have to have a database at your church with filters.
Yep.
You don't want a preschool email going to somebody with only high school students or an empty nester.
Yes.
You have to figure out how to get those emails to the right people. And that only comes through a database with filters. And honestly, you could do Microsoft Excel.
Yep.
And, if your church is at a spot where you can't necessarily buy one of these, Arena was one that was used. Roll Call was one that was used. These are huge database systems that keep up with a lot of people with a lot of tags to be filtered. So keep an Excel spreadsheet of everybody in your church. What are their kids' names, birthdays? And the benefit of having birthdays, and you do have to have birthdays, is that you know exactly when those kids need to move up to the next environment. Yeah. You know exactly when to send home a cute birthday postcard, right? Because the more personalized you can be, the bigger you are, the more personalized you need to be.
Yes.
Because you want to make your church feel very small, right? And so I would say one email a week.
Okay.
One email a week.
Yep.
And they know that when they open it, they're going to find value there. Yeah. I would also say don't discount snail mail.
Yes.
Postcard. People love, it's a novelty now, right?
Yes.
A handwritten postcard. I wouldn't be able to throw it away, right? My kid's small group leader sends them, the church brings their little postcard to the small group leaders on Sunday. They get a stack of postcards. Hey, all these kids have birthdays this week. Can you write them a letter? Write them a message. Then the church drops it in the mail on behalf of the small group leaders in the church. I would say that has gotten, when we did that at my prior church and the church we attend, which is a different church now, it does the same. Birthday postcards, graduation postcards. If your church is smaller, do wedding anniversaries. Celebrate the married couples who are getting it right. Yes. But don't discount snail mail at all. I would say all big announcements like giving campaigns, service, special service, when one of your Christmas services are going to be, those type of things, create a postcard. It's really inexpensive to run bulk postcard postage these days.
Yep.
So I would definitely recommend not discounting the snail mail.
I love that.
But on your emailing system, the major points to remember are don't spam. One a week should be the rule of thumb. Yep. In some cases, if you're communicating to parents of high schoolers, but they also have a middle schooler, and that's a different email, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying as a church, general communication should be no more than once a week. They should contain a link from last week's message if possible, and a forecast of what's to come, and any special announcements for the rest of the month should go at the bottom.
Yeah, I love that. Very tangible. And I do think that we sometimes under email, but I think even to your point of like, look, how can we be excellent in our emails and add value in every piece of communication? And I love that idea of, as this is a social media church podcast and we talk about digital a lot, when we can translate that to adding a physical element that thing shows up in their mail, especially if it's handwritten and personalized to the individual, that will go such a long way. I think about first-time visitors to your church. Send them a physical, note, or even there's a company that I've worked with called PFL, Printing for Less, but they do packages for companies. And I think about a church, if you send to somebody a physical package and their slogan is 100% packages have 100% open rate, and so like your snail mail maybe only gets so much, but if you get a package in the mail, you're opening up that package for sure. And the relational connection point that you can make with that package is massive. And so that's really great advice, Holly. I want to talk about books for a
Let's
minute,
do it.
and my experience having been an author and I would say kind of an accidental author is what happened to me is I was a social media pastor, kind of pioneering online ministry, 12, 13 years ago, and I kept getting so many phone calls from other churches or emails saying, can we get on a call and you could talk through, and I just got overwhelmed, and so I literally took a weekend and wrote a little ebook that every time, and I say an ebook, it was just a Word doc. And so every time a church would call me and ask me about how are you doing, what you're doing, I would just send them this doc and said, I hope this can answer your questions. Unfortunately, I can't, set up phone calls right now. And then that got forwarded to Group Publishing, who then asked me to write a book called Social Media Guide for Ministry. And what that did for me is two things, Holly. It gave me one, a framework as to what I was doing. So I was actually processing what I was doing, and it gave me a framework to then enhance what I was doing. So it was a really great personal value. And then the other thing is, it led to an authority positioning for myself. And I wasn't planning on getting into public speaking and consulting and all of that, but it opened doors that I didn't even dream about by having that platform. And then on top of that, it allowed me. I think the book sold 6,000 or 7,000 copies and helped a lot of pastors, do social media that I didn't even have to get on a phone call with. I didn't even
Right.
have to even send them that email. Group Publishing did all of that for me. And so it added so much value to my ministry by writing and publishing a book. I think every pastor in my mind has probably dozens of books they'd like to write. Or at the end of the day, if you're preaching sermon series or you're preaching at all, like that could be easily turned into a book and then used in so many different ways. So whether you're publishing with a publisher or you're self-publishing, I just think there's so much value in writing a book. Holly, I'm curious your perspective on and your experience in working with pastors and writing
Mm-hmm.
books. What has that experience been like, and what is that process?
That's another good question.
It's a big question too, because I'm sure there's a big diversity. But I guess I'm
Sure.
curious about how should a pastor that's even got a book in their heart, but they're like,
Yep.
I don't even know where to begin. Where do they begin to even? Should they just start writing it? Should they call you? Should they talk to a publisher? What should they do?
This is the number one question that I get on any inbox that I own, email, text, LinkedIn, social media, is I have a book idea. What should I do with it?
Yeah.
So first, what you're going to experience if you feel like you have a book idea, you'll simultaneously experience imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Why would anybody care what I have to say? What's new in the world that I could comment on? If I write this book, will it make people in my church mad? Will it make people at the office mad? Or will it make me look stupid? Or what if I write it and nobody buys it? What if I write it and it gets a bad review? Every book idea comes, and then immediately what follows is fear and anxiety and imposter syndrome. I've worked with a billionaire founder who has sold at unicorn status, and I've worked with first-time authors, and the one unifying characteristic is that all of us struggle at some point in our journey and dream professionally. We will experience imposter syndrome where we will hear the lie that I have nothing new to say or nothing important to say. But my response to that is twofold. One, you are actually the only person on planet Earth who can share your story and your perspective, because guess what? There is nothing new under the sun. There isn't. That was true in Ecclesiastes, and it's true now. There's nothing new under the sun.
Yes.
The only thing new is your story, your unique experience and perspective, and how God has explained things within your spirit, your take, how you view things. That's the only new thing there is to offer anymore.
Yeah.
And even AI can't offer that. That's the one thing AI cannot do, is tell your story.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and and I'm not just saying this for job security, but I believe everybody has a story in their heart and a book that deserves to be shared. Not necessarily, I don't think everybody should publish a book, but I think everybody should share their story.
Yes.
And so I think that if you're listening to this and you want to share your story and your story, your perspective, a word that God has given you or a perspective that you think could help someone else, I would say the first place to start is to just get out onto paper somehow or onto a voice recording somehow the crux of what you want to say.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, well, it's so disorganized and I don't really know exactly what it is I want to say. I would just say start somewhere simple. I always tell my clients, we're going to start with a 10-chapter outline.
Yep.
The first chapter and the last chapter, let's set those aside. But let's think about 8 new things we want to say. We want to say something about adversity. We want to say something about grit. We want to say something about courage. 8 things we want to say. Of course, you have your overarching topic, right? Let's say it's adversity. Under it, the umbrella of adversity, let's talk about 8 different things. The first and last chapter. The first chapter is introduction. The last chapter is a call to action, right? That's how I structure all my books. So after that, you have 10 chapters that you sort of know what you're going to talk about, right?
Yep.
And then it's just a matter of adding relevant stories, relevant research, relevant scripture, relevant interviews, relevant anything under that topic. You can literally just word vomit about that topic. And then you have the rough draft. What is the rough draft of a book? If you break it down into those steps, identifying the big idea, identifying 8 supporting sub-ideas, and then finding research, stories, personal experience, so other people's stories, your own stories, scripture, expert opinion, doing interviews with people, then you just throw all that into each chapter. You've basically got the rough draft of a book. Now, if you don't have time for that, or you don't have the capacity for that, or that sounds miserable, you don't have to just go spend a ton of money and hire a ghostwriter. There's manuscript coaches, right? Who can, and I'm a manuscript coach as well, walk with you through every chapter, coaching you, giving you ideas and direction and guidance the whole way. Or you can hire a developmental editor who will take a look at what you've got and say, hey, this is going to require basically a rewrite. So it's in between a book coach and a ghostwriter. And then the third level of engagement is a ghostwriter. And I always tell people it's sort of a misnomer because it's a partnership. These aren't my stories. These aren't my ideas. I would have ran out of steam a long time ago as a ghostwriter if I were trying to rely on my own knowledge and experience and wisdom. It's a partnership where it's truly my job to get the best book and story out of you by asking the right questions, leveraging, engaging narrative techniques, keeping the reader following the whole way. That's my job, is to truly get the story out of you. But if you are listening to this and a ghostwriter or manuscript coach or an editor, it's just out of your budget, I would say start with your big idea, identify 8 sub-ideas, and literally just support those sub-ideas with stories and research. And then from there, if you still don't know what to do, there are communities on LinkedIn and on Facebook where people cannot afford the services of a professional, but you can barter with someone. Hey, I'll read your book and give feedback if you'll read my book and give feedback. And there's also community groups. I found one at a community college 45 minutes away. This was like almost 20 years ago when I was writing my science fiction young adult trilogy, which it's still, you can still get it. I'm not going to say I didn't publish it under my name. At the time, I had a very serious pen name. But I found this community where we just showed up and read our books and people gave feedback. Like there's never an excuse not to take the next step if you are a resourceful person and you truly feel like this is your calling, right? If you feel like this is your purpose is fuel for any obstacle. And that's why keeping purpose at the heart of everything that we do, I think, is so important. Because if money is your purpose, money won't get you through every obstacle. Your parents being proud of you, even achievement for achievers. None of that is going to be fuel for the long haul. Fuel for the long haul is understanding your purpose as a writer and your purpose as a pastor and your purpose as, you know, a social media manager, podcast host extraordinaire. It's having a purpose and keeping that at the forefront of all that you do, having that be your North Star and your beacon. Yeah. That's the only thing that's going to help you. And it's going to take the excuses away, right? Because when your story intersects with someone else's story and they reach out to you and say, you know, Nils, just to get a little personal, I went through a crippling, blindsiding divorce 5 years ago that I did not see coming. And being someone who, you know, has been a professional Christian for most of her career, I thought, this is it for me. This is it for me. I'll be Hester Prynne and wear the scarlet letter, you know, being a divorced woman. Did not see it coming. Total blindside shock, depression, grief, you know, all of it. This was, I guess it's been more than 5 years now. Gosh, it's been almost 6. But I didn't start sharing that publicly until about 2 years ago. It took me that long to understand that the potential for good was greater than the potential for bad. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately what everybody has to decide about sharing their story, is that my story intersecting with someone else's takes what I'm sure was meant for evil and for bad and to limit me and leverages it for good. Yes. And it makes that pain a currency, right? A currency that I would not have otherwise relationally if I didn't share it. It leverages the pain for good. Like, what's the point in pain if we just say, that really hurt, let's move on, unless we first process it and heal, but then help other people heal, right? Yes. Or help other people avoid that pain by sharing our story and allowing them to grow in wisdom. So I think anybody listening who wants to write a book, I would identify your purpose. I would certainly overcome anxiety by asking, okay, what's the potential for good here? What's the potential for life change and transformation? And what really matters? And if we're talking about faith, folks, what matters more than serving each other, right? Yes. Just like Jesus served the disciples, like what matters more? And so, again, I didn't mean to preach at you, but I'm very passionate about my career. So if you cannot,
it's so good. Tell. When I saw on your website that you partnered with Ed and Lisa Young going through their recent tragedy. Goodness. Lisa was actually Small World, my first grade elementary school teacher back in the day. But it is, I think, in the midst of our pain, so often are so many learnings that we gain and are able to use to help others. And I think at the end of the day, what I want everyone listening to this podcast to hear is you have a book in you. And I heard, talking to one of my clients who helps, people self-publish, was saying that I think it's something like 96% of people have a book they'd like to write and less than 2% ever actually write it. And I don't know what the exact stats are, but it was mind-blowing to me. It is true. I think when I think about leaders and so many of us, and I think to your point of, whether it's imposter syndrome or they think they're too busy or whatever the reason might be, I think you need to write your book. And you might be listening, you're not a senior pastor. You're like, oh, only our senior pastor should write a book. I think everybody has a book in them. And in the worst case, you write it and nobody reads it, but you at least wrote it. And that will be, in many ways, an incredible process for you to go experience. Through. I do think, too, the other thing, though, that I see churches doing with books that is an incredibly valuable resource is it's an incredible tool for your congregation to use to invite people to their church, to introduce their pastor to their friends. And it gives, in many ways, credibility and authority to you as a pastor of, oh, they wrote a book. There's something and a level of connection that can be made. And, I think there's 2 pastors that I think of that friends in ministry that have gone through the book writing process in the last few years that it's been fun to journey with them through. One is here in New York, my friend John Tyson had one of his congregants say, that sermon series is so good, can I basically turn it into a book, and we'll co-author it, and I'll write it, and then you can edit it, and we'll publish it. And that's been a great resource for their church. And they just self-published it. It was super easy. It didn't take John really any extra time. But he had that book resource that he's been able to share with so many people, and it's a front door for their church. My other client, that's probably now very known, but he wasn't when I got to know him. That's Mike Todd. But he had a sermon series go viral called Relationship Goals, and I remember talking to him like, Mike, this should be a book. And he, and I don't know the process, but I assume he didn't write the book, and he's never even shared that with me. But he took that sermon series that had such great engagement. He actually just had his third book that was all sermon series turned into books. Third one, go New York Times bestselling author. And at the end of the day, just because you write a book doesn't mean, and the goal I don't think should be a New York bestselling author, but he wrote a book when he prepared that sermon series, because with that, he went through a process of finding stories. He went through a process of studying scripture. He went through a process of aligning thoughts to transformational messages that were packaged together in a series that were essentially chapters in his book. And so I believe whether it's coming out of a situation of grief and pain, or whether it's a sermon series that you wrote, or whether it's just your autobiography, you have a book in you. And I want to encourage every pastor, ministry leader to start writing that book, or begin that process of organizing your thoughts in a way to do that. And I want to encourage just practically, and I've got another question for you as we wrap up, Holly, that I think, Holly, your expertise is so unique in that area, and your understanding of both the church and pastors, that they just, reach out to you to begin that conversation. And I'm confident you'll point them in the right direction, whether you're the right person to help them or not.
Absolutely.
Because it really is a unique experience, and allowing, an expert to guide you through that process, whether they hold your hand through the process or just guide you in the right direction. Right. Don't try to make it up as you go. And Holly, I think you gave great advice as to how you can, do it on a shoestring budget. But I think also, like, it's worth spending money on, even if you never financially see that money come back, you will see it come back in different ways. So that's, I think when I wrote my book, I probably made $10,000 on it, but realistically, I probably made $500,000 on it from consulting contracts and other things that have come back from it, and the authority that has come from it. And so there's so much value, I think, that can come out of writing a book that I think is just understated. And I just want to encourage everyone to lean into that. But Holly, you mentioned it earlier, and I'm gonna U-turn it a little bit here. AI, and AI is one of those things that everyone is talking about, playing with. Chat GPT, all of these things. There's AI editors, AI writers. Where's this going with AI? What's your perspective of, like, what do we need to never stop doing as humans, and what do we need to maybe lean into with this AI technology from your perspective as an expert copywriter?
That's the question of the era, isn't it? It's are you worried you're going to lose a job? Are you worried, the AI is going to take over? And, there's always something new to worry about. So I try to take, there's not been a technology development like this, maybe since the internet, right? But I would say that I leverage AI like I would a really good search engine. And I think that's its best use. Unless you're willing to do the training, there are very elaborate prompts, and a lot of people on LinkedIn give away a lot of great prompts. And so, pastors, if you're listening, I would hop on LinkedIn, follow these AI experts. It's certainly not me, but look for these. I do use a few prompts now and again to do very specific research. But for the most part, you know what I love? Hey, I have a Chat GPT subscription, so I get access to the 4+ Chat GPT, and I do love it. I'll say, give me 30 synonyms for the word difficult that start with the letter R. Nice. There's nowhere else you can do that. And so from a copywriting perspective, it is very, very useful. And there's no other, platform to use you can't Google that and get the same results. You can't. You'll get 7,000 websites and none of them will spit out the right thing. But that's one really great use for AI. But what I said earlier still holds true. AI can pick up on sentiment, but it can't emote. It has no soul. It has no discernment. What it has is experience. And I think instead of being afraid of it, a much healthier approach is to say, well, how can I leverage this thing to help my thing be easier? And there are classes, and I did take an AI workshop class that taught me a ton that I probably should, frankly, Nils.
You're good. You're good.
So sorry. I should be using more, right? I should be using it more. But right now, I just use it as a super-powered search engine to find to locate very specific outcomes. Or you could say, give me 10 Warren Buffett quotes on entrepreneurship, and it'll spit out 10 quotes. But it's fallible, right? You definitely need to double check if you're going to use like a direct quote or a direct stat, unless you say, and include the citation from where you found it in the prompt, because I have noticed a lot of mistakes coming out of AI. And, you can spot AI generated content. It's fairly easy because it's very emotionless and formal. Even when you tell it to speak casually, it just sounds cheesy. So it's just not human. And so what humans can do is figure out a way to leverage it to help you. But I would definitely not lean on it for anything longer than a few words. I definitely wouldn't copy and paste from it. You can spot that type of writing a mile away. You could say, hey, write a church email and to my congregation in the voice of, a pastor that you admire, and include the following details. Take that, but then edit it, right? Then add your personality, add your tone, just use that as a jumping off point. And that is what I love about AI. I do love that it gives people a jumping off point. Hey, I'm a church in this area, and I need 10 Instagram post ideas, caption ideas, enter, and take those caption ideas but add your church's tone and voice and brand to it. So it is great to generate ideas and to get the ball rolling. But if you're copying and pasting, it will come off as inauthentic, because again, it can pick up on sentiment and it can mimic sentiment, but it cannot itself emote, and it does not have a personal tone. So that's my take on AI. I use it every day. I use ChatGPT every day to look for words, to say, hey, what's a word similar to trial but doesn't mean the same thing as sadness? Like you can get those nuanced answers that you can't through a Google search. But again, do not copy and paste. Resist.
That's good.
Resist the urge.
That's great advice. And I think that we're in a season where it's so new and it's worth experimenting and testing and using a little bit, but it is not replacing humans, and it should not replace humans. And so I think it's progress with caution, and but don't, it's not useless. It will obviously be useful in a way, and obviously can be useful in a copywriting standpoint. So Holly, thank you so much for all of your expertise and insights. How can people connect with you?
You can connect with me on my website. I just relaunched and rebranded. It's called thestoryspark.com. That's TheStorySpark.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. It has all my social media links on there, my email on there. You can book a free 20-minute consult with me on there, or an hour coaching call that's paid. That it has all the good links. All the links. Head there.
Yes. Well, I want to encourage everyone to do two things. I want to encourage everyone to do three things. One, go to thestoryspark.com and just look at a well-crafted website because you can see the messaging of Holly's expertise in her website and the intentionality there. And so I think you can see an excellently done website, and I think it's worth just learning from. The second thing I want to encourage you to do is go follow Holly on LinkedIn. And so she is the best follow on LinkedIn, and I think you can see, and I think it's just even worth following and learning from how she's writing her post there on LinkedIn. And so even if you follow no one else, follow Holly on LinkedIn. And the last thing I want to do is encourage you to not do the 20-minute call, to do the 1 hour call and get coached by Holly, because I think a 1 hour investment of help us as our church leadership team do this, and maybe you do a 20-minute call and then do the longer call, book a call with Holly. But I would encourage you to invest in your own church, and I got to imagine 1 hour with Holly speaking into your church would be incredibly valuable. To look at your website together, send her some of your emails to read through and get some of that expert advice. And the power of shaping and shifting your words just a little bit can make a massive difference in the life of your church. And so I just think it's such an incredible investment. So Holly, thank you so much for the time. And I hope that everyone here will go and engage and listen to you, because I believe that our churches can go further if we'll lean into copywriting and prioritizing the power of words through our ministries. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening. We will talk to you again on the next episode.